Welcome to Pharmacy Operators Podcast. Welcome, Gaurang. He's our guest speaker for today. Great to have you.
Hello, guys. Nice to be here. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you too. So, just to give Gaurang a brief introduction, you've been around since some of the early days of specialty pharmacy, and you've had an incredible career in different leadership positions, working at some of the largest payers, including Centene and Evernorth, some of the largest specialty pharmacy like Polaris, been on the GPO side, Premier, and an active consultant for market access teams in pharma. So you really have a lens across like the different stakeholders, what they think about, the economics that they think about, the patient outcomes they think about. And so we're really stoked to have you on the show to really share your expertise, talk a little bit about some of the early days and where we've come from there. And so I won't disclose your age, but because you have been around, so
I do
from the
feel
early
old
days,
now.
can you share a little bit about what the early days were like?
Yeah, great. Again, you're putting everything in a little bit of a reflective mode for me. Um, my career started out, obviously, I'm a pharmacist, a proud pharmacist. My career started out in hospitals. And this is almost in a very early days of specialty pharmacy. But when you really think about specialty pharmacies, they weren't really truly termed specialty, right? There were some of these practices were happening that we do it in specialty world today. But primarily, these pharmacies were, hospital, mail order, maybe, in retail and independent, not incredibly complex drugs, small molecules, no cold chain, those sort of things. And then there was a time where there is certain population of patients and disease states due to innovation in therapeutics, they begin to emerge from the traditional pharmacy model. And since then on, there has been multiple kind of times where you know practice began to formalize more and more and more, and they became specialty pharmacies, a lot more prominent specialty pharmacies. And that's sort of how it has been. If I really reflect upon it, I would say some of the earliest specialty pharmacy type of models were associated with hemophilia patients, or some of it was infusion. So these things were now being administered at patients' home, or patients went to outpatient clinics and they didn't have to be administered in the hospital. I remember as early as working in my pediatric hospital days, where I remember working on a business plan to create infusion clinic inside the hospitals. We thought it was a big deal that now we don't have to admit patients to infuse some of these medications. You can do it on outpatient basis, 3-4 hours, and they can go home. Some
You
of
guys were
the
way ahead of your time because I think now something like 25% of hospitals are planning on opening infusion centers because of that exact same insight. But you guys were like way ahead if you were already thinking about that, 10, 15 years ago.
and I think maybe different versions of it, right? So, for example, a big discovery occurred, I think, in my mind, which was in oncology. In oncology drugs, you could always administer these chemotherapies, but the side effects were so bad. Patients would have significant nausea, vomiting, and they would be dehydrated. And because of that, they would have
Mm.
all kinds of other complications. But then some of the anti-nausea medications came out, such as ondansetron. You could administer that. Patients are well taken care of from nausea, vomiting. So now you could administer these drugs in 3 to 4 hours and send them home. So there were some variations of this, and then it continues. You're 100% right. It's still evolving. At one point, many of these hospitals and places felt like, hey, these were not profitable. It's not their core model, so they opened and then they closed, and then now they got back into it because some additional, new therapies are coming out there. So you're 100% right. A great point there.
Yeah. I guess what problem was specialty pharmacy originally created to solve? And then as these new therapies came out, how did that model change? Like what was it really solving at the end of the day today?
It's still the same. It was access to medication, ease of these therapeutics. So when you think about, I spoke about hemophilia, these were extremely expensive medications. There was life savings type of critical element to the disease state. Dosages were complex, and then you couldn't get these medications at your local retail stores. So you needed, experienced pharmacists, experienced
Hmm.
nurses. To quite a bit of degree, it's still the same. That things that you can't get at your local, you know, retail stores, or more complex, very sensitive, but it's not an hospitalized, admission type of therapies as well. I mean, you could almost call it side of care. That's kind of what was happening back then.
Yeah.
HIV/AIDS had a huge impact. That changed everything. That epidemic changed big time.
So with the increase in HIV patients and patients needing those therapies that are also very expensive, I think they're usually mail order and they were mail order at the time, so they're like given to the patient to take home. What what changed in the specialty pharmacy kind of landscape? Was there like a growth spike there because of that? Because that
So
epidemic was huge, right? It was, yeah.
you're right. I mean, that epidemic, in 80s and 90s, there was a lot of. I mean, it was an incredibly sad time, but there was also a lot of discovery happening too. These were, medications that they started to get better. First of all, these patients were often not even having a good place to go get their therapies. This disease states had quite a bit of misunderstanding, taboo, so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of those cases, and then they couldn't go anywhere. There weren't even adequate number of infectious disease, prescribers. Patients had to stay fairly anonymous. They wanted to. It was a very sensitive thing for them and their lifestyle and what had happened to them. So these pharmacies played a big role, frankly speaking. Many of these patients' initial stages, as they got very sick, they were in kind of nursing home type of facilities, and there was nobody to serve these patients that needed, you know, so many medications all day long in certain dosage form that they can take it. And frankly speaking, I know personally at least three or four pharmacies back then in 80s and 90s. They did such a fantastic service in taking care of these patients, and then they were well recognized by local communities. And again, so there was a large patient population. Medications were complex, side effects were severe. It was not uncommon for a patient to take 20, 30, 40 pills a day,
Yeah.
two, three times, right? There was a lot of education needed for patients, how to take it, what would happen. Adherence was very important, because it was, you were measuring your viral loads and things like that. So specialized pharmacies begin to emerge. And then because of the access issue, since it wasn't adequately available in every part of the country, some of the models they were successful at local, in the cities, Houston, let's say Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a big hub for specialty pharmacy, as we know. Um, they began to create mail order pharmacy solutions, and mostly focused on HIV. And I would say this is kind of like the formative years of mass market specialty pharmacies
Hmm.
first.
Yeah. And so I think kind of related to that. So there was that spike in the development of the specialty pharmacy market. We're seeing now, like I know as an end state today, it represents something like 50% of the drug spend. What were some of the other factors that led to it being such a big revenue spend right now for practices.
Yeah, and then you're right. That is exactly what it was. High cost. The whole patient conundrum, taking care of these patients, sad outcomes were very high cost to the communities, very high cost to the payers. So that did drive that entire model of adherence,
Mm.
education, making sure patients has enough drugs in their hands. Since these were high cost, if there were challenges in paying for these medications, let's take care of a variety of different programs that were available, including foundation money, things
Yeah,
like
that
that.
became a big
All of that
driver too.
started to merge together.
Hmm.
Hopefully, I answered your question.
Yeah, I think another driver that people talk about is the Orphan Drug Act, which allowed
Mm.
pharma companies to now innovate in the rare disease space, basically making it so that there was a commercial opportunity for people to provide these high cost therapies for smaller patient populations at a very high cost, but
Yeah,
now there are therapies that couldn't have happened before. So I
yeah,
think, yeah, many different factors, but that definitely helped for that innovation spike needed.
yeah. No, 200%. That's that Orphan Drug Act. I think that was in early '80s, if I'm not mistaken. That created incredible amount of funds, and that allowed a lot of this innovation that was happening on, you know, DNA mapping, very rare diseases, that we didn't have any therapies, so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, now you had a slew of disease states that were never even properly diagnosed. Now you had
Yeah,
therapies.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is pretty incredible. Like as an industry, we've come a pretty long way to solving some of the hardest diseases. Like one of my favorite drugs is Alnylam's drug, the one for spinal muscular atrophy. That's I think it's called Amvuttra.
Hmm.
It's just like a very nice example of how genetic therapies have really made it possible for kids who probably could never have walked previously
Yeah,
to now have like a life where they can run around and do things.
absolutely.
Um,
I mean, I think
yeah.
other one that's fascinating is Luxturna to me. This is the drug where some babies are born with certain genetic disorders and they would lose their vision by, 3 years of age. But with this therapy, if that they're identified early enough, they get this therapy, they would have vision for life.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Now it does have a hefty cost of, I think, $800,000 or something to that effect. Don't quote me, but that these innovations have been just, you know incredibly amazing. That's what those are the type of things that have actually attracted so many of us clinicians to get into this.
Hmm.
You know,
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess like we can talk about the misconceptions you see. I guess a lot of folks outside of specialty pharmacy or even ones within it, sometimes people don't really know the operational challenges that are there because you've like been there and seen it. What are some of the things that happen that are much bigger hurdles than people kind of understand or are much more nuanced in the challenges that really need to be worked on that are hard, just difficult for various reasons?
yeah, I think there are several, right? But you spoke about the specialty pharmacy patients and the disorders that we treat. They're very unique, and a lot of that workflow, it's not it's not straightforward. It's complex. A lot of different things have safety issues. So make sure those things are well validated, checked, compliance with the FDA label, compliance with because pharmaceutical companies are at risk as well if these medications are given in without certain checks and balances. So the one of the largest challenge that I think that still exists, it's a very effective, intuitive workflow system. And that because you would still see people having handwritten notes,
Yeah.
lack of standardization, or you know center of excellence, uh, with so many variations after variations, and that doesn't allow us to be as speedy and effective. It's highly dependent on talent that remains within only handful of people, the knowledge wise. So knowledge management is also issues. I mean, just as a plethora of issues out there, and I'm just only touching two or three of them.
Yeah. And I guess this is a little bit more of sort of stepping back if we look at the other stakeholders in specialty pharmacy besides the patient and the pharmacy. We have like payer, we have pharma, and really they have a major influence in, the patient journey and how operators have to deal
Mhm.
with paperwork basically or access challenges or whatever in order to get the patient the therapy. I guess what do payers optimize for that pharma doesn't really appreciate enough?
Yeah, great question. I think these are, you earlier touched on, nearly 50% or more, pharmaceutical spend is on specialty side. So payers have been very much alerted by this trend. They see the need for a much better coordination of care for these patients, right? Appropriately, diagnosed, and then once they are diagnosed, they get the medication on time, they are adherent, so on and so forth, and outcomes is what they are looking for, payers as well as pharma. And to some degree, they have the same goals, but their measurements could be a little different how they look at
Hmm.
it. Pharma would want to get a medication in patient's hand very quickly and as many time as possible, versus payer wants to make sure that, hey, I'm paying two, three, $400,000 for these therapies. Is it really working? Do we have right interventions to check? So all of that comes down on specialty pharmacy operator to ensure both of their
Yeah.
clients, right, payers and pharma, are getting what they need,
Hmm.
and then that's not an easy task for uh, the pharmacy operators.
No, it's not. And I guess what do pharmacy operators need to kind of show to payers or to pharma, and how does that differ? I guess you've touched on the KPIs they care about, so that probably drives a lot of it. But because the operator is sitting there in the middle with this tension between like I got to get the patient to therapy quickest, and also on the payer side, I got to make sure that basically I meet all the criteria. Like functionally, what that looks like is a prior auth for the payer, and functionally, what that looks like for pharma is maybe it's like data that they provide or something like that. I guess in doing this well, what do operators need to think about?
No, it's great. So both and everybody, when this disease states, patients are diagnosed, right? The speed to therapy matters to patients, physicians, payer, and pharma. So getting it in patient's hand fast, accurately, it's incredibly important.
Everyone's aligned on. Everyone agrees. This is what needs to
Correct.
happen.
Right. Now, the challenge is, in order to get these things done very fast, but at the same time, there's a high cost. So managing that effective use of the drugs, truly getting the value out of it, you know, while payers are expected to have checks and balance for these things on behalf of their stakeholders. I think there is sometimes friction here. How pharmacies operate or what pharma is expecting from their KPIs, and encouraging to get things super fast, and payers are checking that are these things absolutely accurate? Are we, so I think there is some of that challenges do exist. Some of the data is not available in between to provide to the payers for validity. Some of the uh, prior authorization criteria, they're not as clearly articulated.
Mhm.
Sometimes that they are left upon the pharmacy, PBM operators' hands to check and say, is this accurate or not? And all nothing. Payers have an incredible challenge that I would say, in their defense, is a lot of these disease states are incredibly unique and rare. So
Yeah.
it's not like they are seeing, hundreds of patients in this category. They see five, 10, 6, even on a, let alone ultra rare, right? So when
Mhm.
those patients come up and those therapies show up, they're trying to understand, what does it all mean.
Mhm.
So that's another. I think they have a huge burden on figuring things out. And then that's where I've seen number of cases that a really good partnership is also happening from specialty pharmacies as well, to get things right. Educate on everybody's behalf, and do things.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I guess to that point, one of the natural trajectories for successful specialty pharmacies is acquisition, and that's happened historically in the space quite a lot. What are some of the ones that you were, you know, able to see kind of close up, and how have they shaped the industry?
Yeah, I was. I witnessed, or I was part of so many M&A that some of them I probably won't remember. But as early as in 2000s, when specialty pharmacy started to become a lot more defined, you had some well established organizations such as Priority Healthcare, Accredo, iCore, as well as CuraScript, which is where I used to work, and PBMs such as Express Scripts and Medco and others begin to realize that their clients are expecting a better management of this disease stage that they don't have expertise for. So I joined right when Express Script bought CuraScript, and within 6 months they bought Priority Healthcare, both
Mm,
in Orlando. Now, Priority Healthcare and CuraScript were merged into one brand, which was CuraScript. A handful of years later, and at the same time, parallel to that, Credo was purchased by Medco around the same time, 2004, 2005. There were a lot of different brands underneath those brands as well, by the way, and so that's that. Thereafter, Express Scripts' acquisition of Medco led to the largest specialty pharmacy at that time was Accredo, right? The
mhm,
merger of Accredo and CuraScript. Express Scripts decided to keep Accredo as a brand because it was much more recognized in physician communities and certain orphan diseases and things like that. So those were, some massive acquisition, and then all of that triggered other PBMs and payers to get into the next tiers of specialty pharmacies as well, and that continues. You had retailers buying specialty pharmacies. You had you know so many different organizations getting into it. You had wholesale distributors getting into specialty pharmacies, GPOs getting into specialty pharmacies. So probably I myself, if you asked, since you asked me specifically, I think I must have seen about 9 M&A of
mhm.
this various specialty pharmacy brand.
And do you think they brought the value that the organizations were looking for post acquisition?
Incredible value, frankly speaking. Because these PBMs were emerging as a very effective tools in managed care to manage formularies and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they just didn't have a great handle on what to do with specialty drugs. So,
Hmm.
uh, organizations such as CuraScript that had, you know, entire, brand. Another pharmacy within that was called Freedom Fertility. That's the largest fertility pharmacy in the country, even today, in my opinion. All of these, hemophilia, IVIGs, all those uniqueness that PBMs didn't have core capabilities. These organizations were able to bring that. They were able to bring care management part of that, and that increased the adherence. They brought the nurses and those services in there, and became truly the partners for pharma to address those orphan disease drugs and so on and so forth. So even revenue wise, they started to grow significantly. They became, if you even look at today's financials, a lot of these PBMs, their number one financials now comes from something related to specialty pharmacy drugs.
Hmm. Yeah. And so that kind of leads to the next question, which is a lot of specialty pharmacies get some type of revenue from pharma. What does a good collaboration between pharma and a specialty pharmacy look like? And how do, I guess, how do we think about this? Like, is it better for patients? Is it worse for patients? What actually comes out of this?
It is. I think it's very good for patients. It's really about the access, right? When
Hmm.
you think we spoke. Let's take an example of ultra orphan diseases. Some of these patients are only 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 patients in entire nation. If I'm a pharmaceutical company with some innovative drug, I need an outlet to distribute these drugs. You know, I cannot put this drug on the shelves of every retail pharmacies
Yeah.
across the country. So economically, it doesn't work. Then there's a lot of monitoring. There's a lot of safety, education. So so many other support services. So specialty pharmacy provides incredible, channel to support that. And a lot of time prescribers, we know a lot of prescribers are sometimes they're not, they feel overwhelmed about managing
Yeah.
these and patients. So they truly appreciate specialty pharmacies as well. There's a lot of
Hmm.
value.
Yeah. Okay, to end off, I think we've talked a little bit about the beginning. We talked a little bit about the state of affairs today, and now really kind of future state. Where do operations need to evolve the fastest in the next 2 to 3 years? And kind of what technologies or kind of efforts, process wise, people wise, should they be thinking about?
Yeah, it's going to be a great combination and a heavy reliance on next level of technology. I'll say that in almost every area, to some degree, it's kind of mind-boggling that we had so much innovation in biologics, pharmaceutical innovation side, but delivering this patient care very effectively, where data, the speed, outcomes is so important. I believe the pharmacy operating systems, pharmacy management systems, they are still antiquated, significantly antiquated. We have $265 billion industry today, and I think many of our technology, very sizable amount of this uh, dollar and patient population goes through not incredibly impressive technology. And then I say that with great, consciousness, because that's what I had to lead my organizations. That's what I've been going through. So focus is, um, accuracy, quality, speed. That remains the same. And now we have AI tools. if we can
Mhm.
integrate them better, not just in one or two or three steps of our workflow, but in entire life of script, and then do it fast, do it high quality, and then put pharmacists and caregivers more at a clinical intervention and outcomes level. That is the key. We still have a lot of our staff doing lots of troubleshooting and administrative and things that undocumented policies, procedures, whatnot.
Yep. Yeah.
So I believe we've got to take great advantage of the new generation technology. The investment that we have, even we as a nation have made, billions of dollars. Sooner we get to it, better we are. And I think this area is incredibly ripe for those type of innovation.
Mhm. And I guess kind of related to that, and this is sort of because you have such insight into what market access teams think about, where do you think they should be sort of evolving fastest in the next 2 to 3 years and paying attention to sort of the specialty pharmacies adopting XYZ in order to, help meet their goals?
Great question. I think market access teams have really, really, they're in very difficult situations. They have a great product, great innovative solutions, molecule or biologics in their hand, and they know the challenge of those diseases and patients, and they need a great, great partner. They're looking for true outcomes. That's how they are also getting paid to some degree, value-based contracts and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
They're bringing value to the payers and others based on the outcomes. And they're being challenged and demanded big time to prove that. Market access team is often very challenged in figuring out who's got the most streamlined capabilities, who's got the. I would say market access team, and many of them are not very big teams, although they are
Mhm.
very large organizations and they have a lot of responsibilities. So I would encourage that team to be partnering with some of the specialty pharmacies or IT solution providers, somebody who's well advanced in AI, work with them, create pilots. And, if you have a product coming in market 18 months from now or 2 years from now, you know, take a chance. I think you will see a great number of outcomes from there, and it will be so valuable for their bottom line as well as all other stakeholders.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great time to kind of see what the innovations can bring right now because a lot is possible that wasn't before.
Right.
Um, okay, great. So I think we'll wrap up here. Any final thoughts for the audience? Anything you would want to say to a pharmacy operator that maybe like a one-liner you'd want to share to a pharmacy operator starting out today or to another leader who maybe hasn't seen the payer side or pharma side that you have seen?
I learned this long ago from one of my mentor at Express Scripts, Evernorth, and that was embrace change every moment, and be open to it, be creative, and I think that's where we are today. We need to be ready to embrace change fast, and it's very exciting. There's always
Mhm.
something happening.
Yeah, it definitely is. So thanks so much for being on the show today. This has been a great chat. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.